So I have learned over the years that life leaves clues. So in this masterclass, we're going to explore timeless principles focused in on honesty, humility, wisdom, character, and perspective. And the people that understand this operate on the H&L, as my wife says, which is a whole nother level. Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to Stepping Stones to Your Success. This is Garland, and tonight we're going to be going into what's called Fundamental Natural Law Masterclass number 1, which is going to be about truth, character, and consequences. So, let's begin. I've learned that every strong foundation begins with truth, because the moment people start lying to themselves or others, everything starts to break down. Which brings me to the first fundamental natural law, which is you never get in trouble for telling the truth. He ran the testing examinations, and after the testing examinations, he got all the heads of schools and chief instructors into a room by ourselves. And he says, listen, I know nobody likes surprises, so I just need to let you know up front. I'm going to run this black belt promotions for the people I think that have passed their examination. But I just need to let you know up front, all of your number ones, all your top dogs, I'm not going to promote them, just so you know that. Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to Stepping Stones to Your Success. This is Garland, and tonight we're going to go into Fundamental Natural Law number 1. It's called You Never Get in Trouble for Telling the Truth. Let me share a quick story with you. It's called I Mean No Disrespect. Every year, Grandmaster Buell gets us together, and he does the black belt testings. On this particular year, he got a hold of all the heads of the schools and chief instructors and says, as you know, we got black belt testing coming up, but on this year, I want you to also bring me your top dogs. Bring me your number ones, because I want to test them too and see where they're at. So we said, okay. So we only have testing one time a year for adult black belts, and Grandmaster Buell's the one who runs that. So I need a good solid 9 to 12 months to get my folks ready for that. Now, as we get them ready for it, I'm explaining to them, says, hey, listen, you're getting ready to go down a very challenging part of your life here. We're going to be taxing you mentally. We're going to be testing you physically. We're going to be testing that indomitable spirit as well. Now, I can't go down this test with you. I can't test for you. I'll wait for you on the other side, and I'll welcome you into the black belt ranks with open arms, but this is something you're going to have to do alone. Now, we're going to get you ready. You do what I tell you, when I tell you to do it, and how I tell you to do it, and you got a good chance of passing this exam. But it ain't no joke. It's going to be the real deal. Because I'm going to tell Grandmaster Buell when I see him, I'm going to say, hey, listen, I've done the best I can do with these folks. Pass or fail, it's up to you now, sir. But he's going to run the show. On that particular year, what we did was we got everybody together, and then he ran the testing examinations. And after the testing examinations, he got all the heads of schools and chief instructors into a room by ourselves. And he says, listen, I know nobody likes surprises, so I just need to let you know up front. I'm going to run this black belt promotions for the people I think that have passed their examination. But I just need to let you know up front, all of your number ones, all your top dogs, I'm not going to promote them, just so you know that. And we looked at him in disbelief, and we're confused, and we're saying, well, how come? And he just says, they're just not ready. And then he left the room. And then we started grumbling. We started complaining as a group. We started thinking, well, maybe Grandmaster Buell's going crazy. Maybe he's going senile. And so I, in my infinite wisdom, I spoke up, and I says, you know what, I'm going to go talk to him. And they all looked at me and says, yeah, you need to go talk to him. So I got Grandmaster Buell into a room, and it's just he and I said, sir, I mean no disrespect, but I got to tell you, I think you're wrong on who you're going to pass and who you're going to fail on this black belt testing go round. And I'm not the only one that thinks that way. All the head schools believe the same way. And they said, really? I said, yes, sir, really. He says, a big smile came on his face, and he says, well, let's find out, shall we? And so he got all the head schools back into the room with him and I, and he says, Garland thinks I'm wrong on who I'm going to pass and who I'm going to fail on this go-round. And he says a lot of you feel the same way. Now, I need to know who you are. All the ones that believe the same way Garland does, I need you to step 1 foot forward. And folks, I got to tell you, not a one of them stepped forward. They left me there hanging. And I looked at them in disbelief, and I looked at Grandmaster Buell, and I looked back at them and gave them, as my daughter says, the stare of death. And I said, okay, Grandmaster Buell, Lesson well learned. I can only speak for myself. But in speaking for myself, I mean no disrespect. But I still think you're wrong and I got to stick to my guns. Then he says, okay. And then he left the room. And he ran the promotions and he promoted all the brown belts to student black and student black belts to first degree. And then to our surprise, all those people he said he was going to fail, he ended up promoting them as well. Well, now we are totally bumfounded and we are totally confused. And so after all the pictures and the kisses and the hugs and the tears and everybody dispersed and went on home, he got us all back in the room, all the heads of schools. And he says, look, I was testing your people. But at the same time, I was testing each one of you to see which one would have the courage to come talk to me if I made a bad decision. Now, because of Garland's courage, all your people got promoted. But oh, by the way, all of you failed miserably. Now, on the outside, folks, I was very stoic. That means I didn't move around at all. But on the inside, I was doing my happy dance because I learned some powerful lessons that night. And the first lesson I learned, of course, was I can only speak for myself. The second lesson I learned that is more powerful is you never get in trouble for telling the truth. Now, again, what I've learned is what I'm sharing with you now is talk from the heart, tell the truth, and you can never go wrong. So with that said, have a wonderful night. All the best to your family, and I'll be back to you real soon. You know, truth sounds simple until telling the truth becomes uncomfortable. And unfortunately, many people try to avoid short-term pain only to create long-term consequences. You know, I've learned that lies may temporarily protect us from embarrassment, but they almost always introduce us to a whole nother level of pain. And life has a way of collecting payment. Which brings me to our next fundamental natural law, which is, if you lie, it will lead to pain. So he took those matches out back, poured some of the gasoline onto the sidewalk and tried to light the sidewalk on fire. It didn't light. He poured some more of the gasoline onto the grass, tried to light the grass on fire. No joy there either. And then he looked down at the gasoline. There's a little bit left, and it was down in the bottom. And he thought to himself, if he lights this match and drops it down in there and hits that gasoline that's on the bottom, it'll light on fire and swirl around down there and look really cool. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to Stepping Stones to Your Success. This is Garland, and we're going to be going into Fundamental Natural Law number 4, which is, if you lie, it will always lead to pain. So let me tell you a quick story. It's about the lie. There was once a young boy. He was spending his summer, much like many 9-year-olds did, but he was very involved in an important project. On that particular day, he decided to break his own world record of finding 32 horned toads in one day. Now, what a horned toad is about big around as my hand. They're flat. They run really fast. They got horns on their head and back. They bite, but it don't hurt much. Now, coming back to the mission for a moment, there was plenty of those horned toads in the 5 acres. It was his backyard. Now, he was up to 27 when he stumbled across something else. He found a 5-gallon old metal gas can that was missing the lid. An idea came into his mind as he looked at that gas can. So he abandoned his search for horned toads with that gas can in tow, headed back to the house. Went in through the kitchen door, which is the back door, and was fumbling around through the drawers. Now, his mom was in the other room, so there was a wall between. She couldn't see him, but she could hear him. She says, "What are you doing?" And the boy said nothing, and that was big mistake number 1. Because what he was doing was he was searching for some matches, and he found some. So he took those matches out back, poured some of the gasoline onto the sidewalk, and tried to light the sidewalk on fire. It didn't light. He poured some more of the gasoline onto the grass, tried to light the grass on fire. No joy there either. And then he looked down at the gasoline. There's a little bit left, and it was down in the bottom. And he thought to himself, if he lights this match and drops it down in there and hits that gasoline that's on the bottom, it'll light on fire and swirl around down there and look really cool. So that's what he decided to do. So he lit the match, went to lean over and drop it in, and boom! Just that fast, a ball of flame blew up right in his face. Torched the whole right side of his face, burned his hand real bad as well, would have put his eye out, but he had glasses on, so it just melted his glasses. Well, that was big mistake number 2. Now, big mistake number 2 just beat the tar out of big mistake number 1. And he screamed as loud as he could. Mom come running out the back door. Her heart just sank when she seen her baby's face was all burned up. Well, she loaded up all the kids in the station wagon. They headed to the hospital, but then realized they ain't got no money. So they headed over where Dad works, got the check early, and headed to the bank to get it cashed. Took 3 hours before the boy finally got medical attention. As soon as he came in, they brought him in right away. The doctor took him into the examination room. Mom waited outside with the kids. Well, after a while, the doctor came out of the examination room and says, I got good news and I got bad news. What you want to hear first? Mom says, well, tell me the good news. Well, the good news is I've medicated your son. He's no longer in pain. What's the bad news then? Well, the bad news is he's burned very severely on the right side of his face, and he's going to be scarred for life. He's probably going to lose the use of his right hand as well, and you got to decide what you want to do about his education, because it's going to take about 24 to 27 months for those wounds to heal. Well, that was a pretty somber trip back home. After that, the fire marshal came over to dispose of that gas can, and he looked at it. It had blown up into like a ball, and he says, bring me your son. So they went ahead, and Mom brought the boy out and says, son, you see that can? You were lucky. You were dumb, but you were lucky. See, what you don't understand, boy, is that it's not the liquid gasoline that burns, but it's the fumes or the smell of gasoline that burns. Now, you had a little bit of liquid in that can, but you had 5 gallons of fumes, and that's what exploded into your face. Now, you see how it's all rounded up? In most cases, that can would have exploded. In this case, it stayed intact, lucky for you. Okay, but if it had have exploded, not only would you have been burned from head to toe, but you'd been cut from head to toe as well because of the metal shrapnel coming off that can. So I say again, you were lucky. Okay, you were dumb, but you were lucky. In the future, son, don't ever mix matches with gasoline. It will never work out well for you. The boy nodded his head and says, yeah, I understand. You know how you skin your knee and it scabs over? The whole right side of his face was scabbed over, so was his hand as well. But over time, as the scabs peeled away and flaked off, they say it was a miracle because there was no scar tissue underneath on his face. And through time and perseverance, he did get the use of his right hand back as well. Now, he did miss a whole year of school, got set back a year because it did take a while for those wounds to heal. The question begs to be asked is that a true story? And the answer is yes. Every painful moment of that is a true story because, in fact, that young boy was me. The only residual effects I got of this is that this side of my hairline is a little bit higher than this side over here. And when it gets cold outside, I can feel it on the right side of my face and on my right hand before I feel it anyplace else because the nerves are closer to the surface of the skin because of the burn. But the reason I'm telling the story is that I made a couple of stupid mistakes that day. I wished that when I had the chance, I would have told my mom the truth. If I'd have told my mom the truth, then that would have saved me a whole world of pain. That'll save me a whole year of school. The moral of the story here is if you lie, it will always lead to pain. So that kind of brings us up to speed on Fundamental Natural Law number 4, which is if you lie, it will lead to pain. So all the best to your family. Have a wonderful day, and I'll be back to you real soon. Now, pain does have a way of teaching us lessons that wisdom could have taught us sooner. And that brings us to the next fundamental natural law, which is talk from the heart, tell the truth, and you can never go wrong. And Bridget was running a little bit late, so I said, I'll take him to school. So as I'm taking him to school, he looked at me, he says,
Daddy, am I rich?
And I said, where in the world does a third grader get these kind of questions? And I said, well, I don't know. Let's talk about it. I made it up as we went along. All righty. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to Stepping Stones to Your Success. This is Professor Garland, and we're here to talk to you about the next cornerstone of Stepping Stones, and that's going to be a lesson I learned from my son, my middle boy, Brandon. He was a third grader at the time, and Bridget was running a little bit late, so I said, I'll take him to school. So as I'm taking him to school, he looked at me, he says,
Daddy, am I rich?
And I said, where in the world does a third grader get these kind of questions? And I said, well, I don't know. Let's talk about it. I made it up as we went along. And it says, well, let me ask you a couple questions, son. It says, number one, do you have your health? And it says, yes, my gym teacher told me I was the strongest boy in my class. And I said, okay, good. Do you have your freedom? And it says, yeah, Daddy, you taught me that freedom ain't free and we're blessed that we live in America. And it says, yep, you're right. And it says, okay. And it says, well, do you have your family close to you? And he says, well, yeah, sometimes my sister's too close to me. And it says, okay, good. And I said, do you know the Lord? And he says, yes, I do. And I said, okay, let's review. So, son, you know the Lord, you got your family close to you, you got your freedom, and you got your health. So all four of those things, that leads to a thing called happiness. So let me ask you, Brandon, are you happy? He says, yes, I am. I said, well, good. In my eyes, that makes you the richest guy I know. So that's all I wanted to share with you tonight. If you got your health, you got your freedom, you got your family close to you, if you know the Lord, that's in your corner as well, then you ain't got a lot to complain about. So let's be grateful and have an attitude of gratitude. Have a wonderful evening, y'all. You know the routine. Find your family, give them a hug, tell them you love them, tell them best friend in the world. And have a wonderful night, guys, and I'll see you next time. I have learned that the strongest people in life are not usually the loudest. They are the most teachable, because growth begins the moment a person realizes they don't know everything. Which brings us to our next fundamental natural law. Stay humble, because the day you start thinking you know it all, sure enough, that's going to be the day you stop learning. Well, the Navy captain, he became very irate and fuming, and he sent a final message, and it says,
I am a nuclear battleship! I will not change my course!
Hello everybody, and welcome back to Stepping Stones to Your Success. This is Garland, and today we're going into Fundamental Natural Law number 26, which is stay humble. Because the day you start thinking you know it all, sure enough, that's going to be the day you stop learning. So let's jump on into this thing. Many years ago, I heard a story about a strong, proud captain of a large ship heading to South America on a windy, cold, dark night in August. Now, the captain noticed a very bright light in front of him, and he knew his ship was on a collision course with this fast approaching light. So he rushed over to his radio and sent an urgent message demanding that the oncoming ship change its course 20 degrees to the west. 30 seconds later, the captain received a message. It said,
I can't do that. Change your direction 20 degrees.
Well, the captain got angry and upset. He sent another message. It stated,
I am a Navy captain. I demand you change your course.
A few seconds later, the captain got a message back. It said,
I am a seaman first class. I can't change course. Change your course.
Well, the Navy captain, he became very irate and fuming, and he sent a final message, and it says,
I am a nuclear battleship! I will not change my course!
He then got a brief message back, and it stated,
I am a lighthouse. It's your choice, sir.
The author of the story is unknown, but the message is pretty clear. We have to stay humble, because the day we start thinking we know it all, sure enough, that's going to be the day we stop learning. So that brings us up full speed on Fundamental Natural Law number 26. Have a great rest of your evening, all the best to your family, and we'll be back to you real soon. Life moves fast, y'all, and if we're not careful, we may be spending years chasing things that ultimately don't matter. Which brings us to one of the most important fundamental natural laws of all, which is keep the important stuff the important stuff. I got to tell you, I was just happy to get a seat in that room because there's some fantastic business minds in that room, and hey, I learned a bunch just sitting there watching and listening. But after a couple of years, I remember I was asked to go from the board of advisors to the board of directors. That means I got to sit in the cushy chairs. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Stepping Stones to Your Success. This morning, we're going to be going into Fundamental Natural Law number 57, which is keeping the important thing the important thing. Let me tell you a quick story. This one is about the boardroom. Now, what happens is there's a company out there called Educational Funding Company, and it is headed up by a gentleman by the name of Mr. Nicholas Kokinos. Now, Mr. Nicholas Kokinos, got to tell you, it's one of the smartest guys I ever known. He is by far head and shoulders and has helped taken our martial arts field, martial arts industry into the whole new level. And so I got to tell you, I really owe a lot of our business acumen to Mr. Kokinos and the principles that he shared and taught us all. And the company that he's built and that John Kokinos has built and the team there at Educational Funding Company is second to none. Coming back to that principle, not one of us is smarter than all of us. He has done a great job in getting the best minds in our martial arts field and martial arts industry from a business perspective and have us come together and gelled really well. He has what's called a board of directors, Mr. Kokinos does. Now, Mr. John Kokinos, the son, he's got the board of advisors. I was fortunate enough to be chosen as one of the board of advisors. Now, the way this is set up is when you come into the boardroom, there's a big round oval table, is what it is. And all of the board of advisors sit in the metal chairs around the perimeter against the wall, and all of the board of directors sit in the cushy chairs right there at the round table itself, with, of course, Mr. Kokinos at the head of that table. I got to tell you, I was just happy to get a seat in that room because there's some fantastic business minds in that room, and hey, I learned a bunch just sitting there watching and listening. But after a couple of years, I remember I was asked to go from the board of advisors to the board of directors. That means I got to sit in the cushy chairs. And I remember when we had the first board meeting and me jumping into that next level, I was kind of outside and was waiting for Mr. Kokinos to show up, and I was a little nervous, and I talked to David Deaton. I says, hey, I'm kind of nervous going into this thing. What should I do? And he says, well, just keep your mouth shut, watch and listen. And I said, well, I can do that. So as we walked into the room and filed in the room, got our seats, then Mr. Kokinos came in, and sure enough, everybody stands up and applauds because that's what you do when he comes into the room. And as we settled into our seats, the first thing he did says, well, welcome everybody. It's good to have all you guys here. Appreciate you coming in from literally all over the world to be with me today. And Garland. And I said, oh, crap. And here I am. I wanted to be a fly on the wall. I want to be left alone. All I want to do is just watch, listen, and learn. And he picks on me right from the get-go. And I said, yes, sir. And he says, how you doing? And I says, well, we're doing great, sir. Our testing numbers are off the chain. Our contract amount is through the roof. And he looked at me and says, Garland, shut up. And I said, excuse me? And he says, yeah, shut up. And I said, oh, yeah, that's what David told me to do as well. I said, son, I didn't ask you about your business. I asked you how you doing. How's your health? How's that wife of yours doing? Bridget, how is she still putting up with you? How's those two boys of yours? I think their name is Andre and Brandon, and I know you got a little girl too named Kaylin. Tell me about that little girl of yours. We'll get to the business stuff soon enough, but right now, talk to me about your family. Talk to me about you. That's what I want to hear about. So I got to tell you, that was amazing. On that day, I formed a core value that I still carry with me to this day, and I thank Mr. Kokinos for teaching me that. And the main thing is that I learned out of that is we got to keep the important stuff the important stuff. We'll talk about business soon enough, but really it revolves around our families. And everything that we do really revolves around what's in the best interest of our children, what's in the best interest of our wives or our spouse. And I got to tell you, Mr. Kokinos, I'm really thankful to him because he helped me to keep my life in proper perspective. Or another way of saying it is the main thing is you got to keep the main thing the main thing. Let's keep it more simple. Let's keep the important stuff the important stuff. So again, coming back to full circle, Fundamental Natural Law number 57, keep the important stuff the important stuff. So all the best to your family. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll be back to you real soon. Truth, character, humility, and perspective. These are not just ideas. These are, in fact, fundamental natural laws. And people that live by them operate on a whole nother level. We call it the H&L. So thank you for being part of this journey. Until next time, let's keep the important stuff the important stuff. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. All the best to your family, and I'll be back to you real soon.